Linear function. Linear functions are special because they have a constant rate of change. Please turn and talk to the person next to you. What's it mean for something to be constant? But linear functions have a constant rate of change. So today we're going to talk about how to find the slope. The slope is just a different name for rate of change. The slope is the change in y over the change in x, the change in my dependent variable over the change in my independent variable, the change in my outputs over the change in my inputs, the rise over the run, the vertical change over the horizontal change, etc., 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 etc. Okay? There's a million different names for slope. You're going to hear me use them all. Most commonly, I'm going to say slope, and for reasons that I did not decide, we call slope m. It wasn't my decision. That's just what we do in math. I can't really tell you why. We can find the slope if we have 2 points. And we have a formula for that. It's nice and blurry on my screen now. It's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Kind of weird. Where if you have 2 points, this would be point 1 and point 2. So x2 means the y value from the second point. x1 means the y value from the first point. x2 means the x value from the second point, and x1 means the x value from the first point. Gross. And so because we're subtracting, that's finding the change in the y's. We're subtracting the x's, we're finding the change in the x. Great. Let's just go ahead and move on. First thing we're going to do is find slope from a graph. In this class, we watched this really cool video. It's called Slope Dude. But I really want them to be here. So,
nice.
First thing, we're going to write out some 3 things to remember when finding slope. I'm going to write them on the left-hand side. If you want to write them somewhere else, that's fine. So I'm going to write it out to the side. Those are 3 things I really, really, really need you to remember when finding slope from a graph. On this first graph, the first thing we need to do is find 2 points that hit the corner of a line. It looks like there's actually already 2 given for you. Hit the corner of a square. A lot of time I'll say corner of a line. That's wrong. Corner of the square. What I mean by that is, let me draw a little square here. So here's like a square on a grid, right? Kind of. Just go with it. That's what it should look like. It's got to hit the corner, like it's got to hit like the 4-way stop between 4 different squares. Now we're going to draw a slope triangle. It doesn't matter which way you draw the triangle. I'm going to go up and over to connect my 2 points. Yep.
Can you just use the dot? You can make a dot on the y-axis.
Yeah, you could do that one as well. I'm not going to, just because we're going to use that in a second for the y-intercept. Okay, now we're going to count our squares. I want to know the vertical change and the horizontal change. The vertical change is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to write that down on the side. Make sure you start at the point. You're not counting full squares, you're counting how many squares the line has traveled. And then the horizontal change would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares it's traveled. We're going to write that in a fraction because we're finding our rate of change. It's got to be a ratio. It's your change in y over your change in x, which would be your vertical change over your horizontal change. So it would be 6 over 8. That fraction can look better. What should it be, guys? 3/4. That's a simpler way to say it. Okay. So that means that my slope is 3/4. A lot of you would just stop there, but you shouldn't, because we need to make sure we have put the right sign. We've got to know, is this line positive or negative? Slope dude skis from left to right. What would he say if he went on this line?
Positive.
Puff, puff, positive. Up the mountain from left to right. I'm going to literally write that down. Puff, puff, positive.
Maybe he's
So it should be a positive 3/4, so that is our final answer. We're going to find 2 points at the corner of a square. It looks like it's already selected them for us. So let's just use those. We can't draw a slope triangle, but I can count the vertical change and the horizontal change. What's my vertical change, up and down? 0. So m equals 0. What's the horizontal change? 6. You count, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0 over 6. 0 divided by anything is?
0.
This is 0 fun. This is 0 fun, right? That's what he says on the mountain. If you are picture retakes and you don't know what I'm saying, the video is on Schoology and you can watch it in a little bit. Now we have a vertical line. We're going to start the same way. Let's take 2 points. My vertical change is 1, 2, 3, 4. Between those 2 points, what's my horizontal change, guys? 0. So my slope is vertical change over horizontal change, so it should be 4 over 0, which is not allowed in math. And we have to say undefined.
Wait, wasn't it just say like x equals -1?
No.
Can't say that?
No. Undefined. Remember Slope Dude, he falls off the cliff and he says, undefined. If you actually ask, don't do this right now, do it later. But if you ask your phone or iPad, ask Siri, what's 0 divided by 0? She'll give you this crazy answer. If you ask her anything divided by 0, she'll say undefined. You can't divide by 0. When looking at the first graph from example 1, would it matter if you found the slope by going up first and then right, like I did, or going right first and then up? Does it matter? For the sake of time, no, it does not. As long as you check the sign with what Slope Dude says, right? Because your vertical change and horizontal change would be the same no matter what. Check the sign. It doesn't matter. So that's your answer for the bottom question there. Does it matter? You can go either way as long as you check the sign and make sure is it positive or negative when you do that. When we find the slope between 2 points, we use that formula from the front. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Every single time I do this, you're going to see me write it down because I don't like making small mistakes. And if I write down the formula, I have a better chance of actually getting it right. So we know the slope, m, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Write that down. Now I'm going to label my points. I'm going to choose a point to be point 1, like say that one, and make this guy point 2. It doesn't matter which one you choose to be point 1 or point 2. We got to do that though so that we don't get the numbers in the wrong order. Let's go ahead and plug in what we got. Let's go ahead and solve this out. I would get -4 minus -3 is really the same thing as adding. So you get -1. And then 5 minus 3 is 2. So your slope is -1/3. We're going to start out by writing our formula, always. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, I don't care what point you make point 1 and point 2. For this one, I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to make 4, 5 my point 2 and 4, -3 my point 1. I know some of you can do this without actually labeling the points and writing the formula, but then I would argue with you, what about that one time that you don't? And you make a very small mistake that could have easily been prevented. Show your work. Let's plug in what we got. What do we say when we divide by 0? Undefined. He falls off the mountain. It's a vertical slope, so you have to say undefined or your answer is not completely right. While you work on that, I'm going to show my work on the board. What's your final answer going to be?
Undefined.
Not undefined. What's 0 divided by anything? 0. Equals 0 is your final answer. Not undefined. 0. So we're going to go to our table now and actually figure out what our change in y and x would be. How I do that is I usually draw some kind of like bracket between the numbers. You only really have to check one set of points, right? 3, negative 4.25 is a point. So is 4, negative 5. You only need 2 points in order to find the slope. So you don't have to check everything in this table, just one set of numbers. When I go from negative 4.25 to negative 5, how am I changing? Would you please tell your neighbor? Let's see. Ellie, how am I changing? Right, negative, so minus 0.75. What about on my x's? Keely, how are my x's changing? Yeah. So I have my change in y, it's minus 0.75. My change in x is plus 1. I write that in a fraction now. Whoop. So I go back to my formula and plug it in. Change in y was negative 0.75. Change in x was positive 1. So every time my x went up by 1, my y went down by 0.75. That's kind of how we described it yesterday. I would prefer you actually divide this and give me a final answer of negative 75 hundredths. So let's first, because I don't like making small mistakes and I like showing my work and getting partial credit, I'm going to write out my slope formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, label your points. Choose one to be 0.1 and one to be 0.2. I'm going to make this 0.1 and this 0.2. Okay, let's look at this problem and plug in what we know. I know that my y2 is 4. My my y1 is 8, so 4 minus 8 on the top. Now my x2 would be x, if I look at the points that I have. And my x1 would be negative 2, so I subtract negative 2. This is our slope, and so that equation right there has to be equal to 4 over 5. What we're going to do to solve this is actually write it proportion and then cross multiply and solve. So let's first simplify this equation. 4 minus 8 on the top here would give me negative 4. And on the bottom I got x minus negative 2. I should just make that x plus 2. That formula is equal to 4 over 5. Now you just got to cross multiply and solve. I'll scoot up. So whoop, whoop. I would get negative 20 is equal to 4 times the quantity x plus 2. You can probably solve that on your own. So if you solve correctly, you should get negative 7. So if you look at this proportion, if you simplify it correctly, this is what you should end up with. 1 is not a fraction right now, so you can make it a fraction and cross multiply, or you could just multiply by negative 6 and continue solving from there. Please check your final answer with mine.